So since we're all gathered here, it seems like just a wonderful opportunity to explore what is most basic nature of our own experience. Is there experiencing happening? You might say that's a kind of silly question because, of course, there is if you're hearing and seeing. It might be a silly question, but I think a really valuable one. A question I thoroughly enjoy asking myself whenever I remember. Am I actually experiencing? Of course I am. Of course you are. But we can remember that this is experiencing, and then we can explore the nature of this experiencing. For today, I would say experiencing can be spoken of as having 6 different dimensions. The Buddha spoke of these 6 dimensions of experiencing. Seeing is a dimension of experiencing. Hearing is another dimension of experiencing. Right? They're seeing and hearing right now. They're both experiencing, but they're like, one way we could say it is they're different dimensions of the same experiencing, we might even say. Smelling is a dimension of experiencing. Tasting is a dimension of experiencing. Sensing, like bodily sensing, is a dimension of experiencing. And then just basic knowing, cognizing, is a dimension of experiencing. Some of what we might explore today might sound a little different for those who've studied the teachings of the Buddha. But I just offer this as an experiential kind of exploration. It might sound a little different than, say, Abhidharma kind of model of experiencing. This is a little more like a Buddha nature perspective on experiencing, in which there's actually just one experiencing, and it has these 6 different dimensions. It can be functioning simultaneously or not. Old Buddha Linji, Zen teacher of old time China, once said something like, "This mind pervades the 10 directions. It's one single brightness that divides itself into these 6 dimensions, modes of experiencing. For the eyes, we call it seeing. For the ears, we call it hearing, and so on. But it's one single brightness that today I would call experiencing. And we all are experiencing. And can we open to different ways, different perspectives, different ways of looking at and exploring this single brightness we call experiencing? Even if it sounds a little different from other versions of Buddhist theory, just for fun, let's try on this perspective today, which is that this dimension of experiencing we call seeing. Could it be that this very seeing is always the same? This type of experiencing we call seeing is not actually arising and ceasing. It's an unchanging expanse, like space. It's a space, dimensionless space, but in this particular mode, it's seeing. A dimensionless space we call seeing, in which experiences arise and cease. Particular experiences, in this case being colors and shapes, sights, constantly arising and ceasing. That's what is always changing, is experiences. But they're arising and ceasing in this dimensionless space we call seeing. Likewise, if we shift our attention to the dimension of experiencing called hearing, we'd say hearing is just like a dimensionless space that has this unique function of hearing. And within this dimensionless space we call hearing, sounds, experiences called sounds are arising and ceasing, ever changing, not lasting for more than a moment. But this space called hearing, in which they're arising and ceasing, is actually not changing. The space we call hearing is totally ungraspable. And yet, we are hearing. It's not a kind of an abstract idea of emptiness. It's our actual hearing right now. But it's when we look for what is this experiencing we call hearing, we can't really say really what it is, and yet it functions as hearing. And it functions so graciously. It allows any sound to arise within it. It allows any sound to cease within it. Seeing is a dimensionless space that's very gracious because it allows any type of color and shape to appear within it without discrimination. It's total allowing, total openness. And hearing, likewise, is a total openness that allows any sound to arise. And same with the dimensionless space we call smelling and tasting. And that dimensionless space, that experiencing dimension we call sensing, like bodily sensing, I think is particularly interesting to explore in this way. It might be a little bit harder to open to this mode. The bodily sensing is like this dimensionless space in which experiences arise and cease. In this case, experiences called sensations, physical sensations, which are, what are they? There's some like sense of contraction or relaxation. Sometimes I look at physical sensations as having those two modes. They seem to appear in different locations, but actually where they're really appearing is within this dimensionless space called sensing. I think this one's particularly harder to open to, I think, than seeing and hearing, because we're so identified with this physical body, with its particular size and shape and location. It seems more solid than an eye or an ear, I think, to us experientially. But can we open to the possibility of that what we call bodily sensations are experiences arising and ceasing within this dimensionless space called sensing, a type of experiencing. The experiences of pleasant and unpleasant sensations are constantly arising and ceasing and shifting within this, whatever we call it, this space of experiencing in the unique dimension of experiencing we call sensing. So if you can follow this in your own experience and open to even the possibility that actually these bodily sensations are happening in this dimensionless space called sensing, it's a very different perspective, is it not, than our usual way of perceiving. Because usually if someone were to ask us, where is this throbbing sensation happening, we'd say it's in my toe or my head or my back. We usually think that bodily sensations are happening within the physical body. I think most people, Zen practitioners and otherwise, usually would understand our experience in this way. So this is whether or not it's even true, this is an exploration we can try on. What if bodily sensations are not happening in the body? To me, when I really investigate my own experience most intimately, that seems to be the conclusion that I come to, is that actually these sensations are not happening in the body. They're happening in this dimensionless space called sensing. Sometimes we even say, when we talk about the body, experientially, what we mean by the body is physical sensations. So we could even go so far as to say the body, in other words, physical sensations, is happening, is arising and ceasing in this dimensionless space called experiencing. Which is kind of like the opposite of our usual way of thinking. I think a lot of people, especially outside of these Zen realms, would say the opposite. They would say experiencing is happening in the body. But today we're trying on this other perspective. It's kind of like the opposite. The body is appearing within experiencing. And to me, it seems actually closer to home. It's not my habitual way of relating to experience, but to me, it seems more true. But I have to stay very present and very open to a non-habitual perspective, which is hard to do because habits are strong. But maybe it's obvious how this new possibility could be very beneficial, at least worth exploring. Because if experience is happening in the body, and the body is like kind of the basis and the kind of fundamental thing, and then when we're alive, there's experience happening in the body, our usual perspective. That one, it just doesn't seem to work out so well. In Buddhism, we call that the realm of birth and death. And if we say the body is what's most fundamental and foremost, kind of like really who I am is the body, then we're trapped in birth and death. Then I will die. So there may be many ways to go about this contemplation of that ultimately speaking, I am not this body. I think that's one of the major themes of the Buddhist teaching. And this is a kind of a sort of a Zen style way of exploring it today. Because what if I am not the body? What if I am this dimensionless and even, dare we say, unchanging realm we call experiencing? If that's my true nature, then of course what we call the body will die. But it's not quite the same issue as this true nature being a realm that actually doesn't die. I mean, this could bring up a lot of questions. And I think maybe the main questions that I imagine would come up for most people, including myself, is, well, it all sounds good, but actually, really, when this body dies, doesn't the experiencing go along with it? And that's, I think that question is basically falling back into the habitual perspective, that actually in my kind of bones and guts, I really do feel like experiencing is happening in the body. Not only is it a kind of a innate kind of habitual perspective, but our society trains us to believe this, reinforces the habitual belief. In modern America, we might call it the religion of scientific materialism. By materialism, I mean the belief that what is most fundamental in this universe is material, physical matter, particularly in this case, the body, the physical body is most real and fundamental. And then within the body, there's a so-called brain. And within the brain, there's electrical impulses. And the interaction of these electrical impulses creates experiencing. It's such a common understanding. We maybe haven't even thought of the details, but we feel that to be so. And the scientific community tends to confirm that. I think the Buddhas and ancestors really wanted to challenge that habitual view. I think that view of materialism, that experiencing is arising within a brain, within a head, within a body, within a world, is I don't know. Today, I kind of feel like that may be our most strongly held blockage to awakening, and so therefore not easy to undo. I think we can hear so many teachings and do so many practices while still holding this view of materialism, that experiencing is happening in our head or in our body. We might even say, well, let's open to experience is happening in our head, but also outside our head. I'd say that no, that's still materialism. There's no experience happening in the head from this perspective, or outside the head. Because what we call the head is an experience arising within this dimensionless space. So it's really like, I think we can't, with this perspective, we can't kind of like approach it a little bit like saying, well, it's, things are happening inside and outside. It's like we really have to kind of challenge this whole idea of inside and outside. So I could say more, but I think it might be interesting to discuss this a little bit, because especially if it's never heard this kind of thing, then it might sound too far-fetched and too strange. But I think we can explore it as a as we explore it, let's try to put aside all ideas of what science says and even what Buddhism says, and try to stay with our actual direct experience, and question together the nature of our experiencing. Do you have any questions or comments or doubts? Yes, Cato.
Thank you very much for your talk. This manifestation in this experience, when you talked about the end of the human body, an immediate thought that came in this expression of experience was expression has always been and always will be, and always has been here, and always will be here. We were talking about, what's that?
What has always been here?
Experience.
Oh, yeah, and here, just to be clear when we're talking about it, I think it's really helpful to make the distinction between these two words: experiencing, which I'm defining as this dimensionless, unchanging realm, and the experience, which is constantly changing events happening within experiencing.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't mean experiencing. We were talking about the unfortunate path we're on with the environment, and I had shared, I had a professor once who said, "Don't worry, the planet will continue. Maybe not for humans, but it will continue." So I believe that as we use up all the Earth's resources, we're converting them to something else. They're not going away. They're being converted into something maybe not useful to humans, maybe poisonous to humans. But I think that your experiencing will continue even if humanity doesn't continue. That was kind of what came to mind when you were talking a bit.
Yeah, there's the classic Zen koan of Amagasa teacher, when the whole universe, we might say here, even limited to, when the whole world is destroyed at the end of the kalpa, maybe that's what's happening here. Is this destroyed or not? And this in Zen with a capital T is another word for, some might say, experiencing. And that's the question. And in that Zen story, different teachers answer it in different ways. Some say, this is destroyed. It goes along with that. And some say, this is not destroyed. So, of course, it's kind of speculative here, but if we're really opening to vast possibilities, we might even question, does experiencing need sentient beings? I mean, usually we think that. It definitely doesn't need humans, because we know animals are experiencing, for example. But if there's no sentient beings at all, could there be experiencing? And I think that's where we start to leave our direct experience. We talk about that kind of thing. It's kind of speculation, but this world and its problems are, from this perspective, arising and ceasing within this dimensionless space of experiencing. And another point comes to mind while we're here is this is another really radical point to explore over a long time. Is the point? It sounds kind of simple. If I talk about my experiencing, and I say, what are the qualities of this experiencing? Well, it's just experiencing, but I might say, but it has the quality of it feels a little tired today. But then I'd say, no, that's not part of experiencing, that's an experience. So that's any qualities or characteristics of this experiencing, I think usually fall into the category we call experiences. And that's what differentiates, like, my experience is different from all of your experience now. We're having different thoughts, we're seeing different colors and hearing slightly different sounds and so on. But if we really are kind of strict with defining experiencing as having no particular characteristics or qualities, because any characteristics would be called experiences, then we say, then we can say, well, my experiencing, is it not identical to your experiencing? Can we find any difference? Well, we do all kinds of differences, but all those differences, I would say, fall into the category of experiences, which of course are different. But if we really look into this, I think we can conclude that this realm we call experiencing, this dimensionless, space-like realm of experiencing, whether it's seeing or hearing or whatever, apart from the content, the experiencing must be identical, not even like pretty similar, but must be identical. Can you follow this? There can't be the slightest difference between my experiencing and your experiencing, but there's a lot of difference between my experiences and your experiences. But if we say we can't find a difference at all, the slightest hair's breadth of difference between so-called my experiencing and so-called your experiencing, then we start to open to this possibility that maybe there's actually just one experiencing, which again sounds kind of far-fetched, but if we follow our own experience, maybe like this. Yes, Neti.
So it feels that if we take on this view that you're describing, it has both a sort of a cooling and a warming effect, in that it's cool in that we become less attached to particular experiences because we see them as within experiencing, so we don't hook on them, but also really warming because we realize all of us are in this same soup together. We're all in this experiencing together, so it creates a warmth, a compassion. So it feels this beautiful way in which it captures both form and emptiness is captured in this way of looking at things.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's cooling and warming. Yes, wonderful. Yeah, we're less fixated on the particular experiences. By less fixated, we don't mean we don't care about them or they're not important. It's just that it's shifting our maybe the importance. Maybe the best way to say it is it's shifting the sense of our actual identity. We usually identify with the body and the thoughts and the emotions as ourself. That's kind of all through Buddhism. The Buddha is saying that's a kind of our basic form, is this identifying with this experiences. We're identifying with experiences as ourself. And that's just like never, we try to work it out as best we can, but it's never going to work out completely. That's called dukkha. But if we don't identify ourselves with the experiences, but I hesitate to say identify ourselves with the dimensionless space of experiencing, just because the Buddha was so cautious about say identifying ourselves with anything. But this is not a thing. It's not even exactly we identify with it. It's more like we're just open to how it is. In Zen, we use the language, our true nature. And so that's cooling and it's warming. not only the possibility that maybe we share one but indivisible experiencing. And if we think saying one is too fixated, we can at least say there cannot be multiple experiencings. There are definitely multiple experiences in one person and in billions of people. But we can't really say if we say there's multiple experiencings, then there must be some characteristic that we can distinguish this one from that one. And then we've fallen back into experience. Warming and cooling. So I think it's an interesting perspective to explore, but the implications for a life of more ease and compassion for others is hopefully obvious. Any other, especially if, any questions are fine, but especially if we have qualms about such a understanding. I think for me, I sometimes have qualms about it. And that's when I love talking with others and exploring the Dharma together. You might have heard it that the Buddha sometimes taught these 3 types of wisdom or prajna, the prajna from hearing teachings or reading teachings. It's the kind of like we understand the concept kind of thing. That's a kind of wisdom. And then there's the wisdom from like reflecting and contemplating and turning it over again and again, which I think this second type of wisdom is especially good with other people, especially good in conversation. The wisdom from kind of saying, well, I heard that's true and it sounds pretty good, but here's my doubts and here's my, let's look at it from all different angles because I might be overlooking something. So I invite you to point out places I might be overlooking. And then as the third type of wisdom is the wisdom from actually becoming the understanding in all the dimensions of our life. But I think these Dharma discussions are especially good for the second type of wisdom. We can hear and read, and then we can even might feel like we have a clear view of how things are now, but it's still good to talk with other people because we might have an unconscious bias or something. Yes, Reverend Mio.
Thank you for your talk. I think quite a few people here are too young to remember, but I keep, during your talk, I kept remembering an old Buddha saying, or rather asking, are you experienced?
Yes.
You remember?
I remember that old Buddha. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced?
Can you say more about this inside joke?
Well, it's a friend who played left-handed electric guitar, Jimi Hendrix. I think he even, so it was a song like that, but then I think he even called like the band, instead of calling it the Jimi Hendrix Band, he called it the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
1967. a long time ago.
And hey, Kokyo, and I think he was talking about what you're talking about with that question of, are you experiencing? When he asked, are you experienced?
Well, we can't ask him now, but we can open to the experience of the images, thoughts, and sounds of Jimi Hendrix arising and ceasing in this dimensionless experiencing. And then, if we open to that possibility, then could this be the realm where we meet Jimi Hendrix directly? We're sharing the same experiencing because here, I brought up the possibility of across all of space, we may share the same experiencing. In other words, you in San Francisco and me in Crestone, we're in different. Our bodies are in different, physical locations. But maybe we're sharing the same experiencing, and that's across space, undifferentiated experiencing. We can also explore across time and say that any experience that has ever happened always happens now. And I would propose that now is another name for experiencing. It's like a synonym. Now, because all these words don't quite reach what we call an experiencing. We can't get a hold of experiencing. That's the nice thing about it. That's why I think it's even okay to say we can identify ourselves with experiencing, because if we're identifying ourselves with some experience, then we can get a hold of it and grasp it. But experiencing is totally ungraspable. So we can say it's ourself, even. I don't mind saying that. But this self is totally it's an ungraspable self, and it's not a personal self, as we've been discussing, right? It's like a shared self. And if Jimi Hendrix in 1967 was experiencing that song arising in his experiencing, that moment of now is ultimately speaking the same moment as now. In other words, that was happening in a dimensionless and timeless realm of experiencing. And that dimensionless, timeless realm of experiencing is this dimensionless and timeless realm of experiencing. And if we say, but that one happened then and this one now, those are, now we're back in the realm of experience. Or we could say, graspable objects. So time, in terms of past, present, and future, and space in terms of here and there, are, from this perspective, arising. Those are experiences arising within this timeless, dimensionless totality we call now experiencing. And therefore also this issue of birth and death is experiences that come and go. And that's the realm of discontent. Anything that comes and goes is the realm of discontent. So from the get-go, it seems like Buddha was emphasizing we're a realm the deathless, the unborn, what doesn't come and go. And then the Zen ancestors had their own ways of talking about this. And today we have our own way of talking about this. But I think they're always pointing to this very radical proposition that like, let's not explore our experience. Which sounds kind of funny in Buddhist world, because we usually think, isn't it all about just being with our experience? Today I kind of emphasizing that's okay, but really what's really has so much potential, I think, is not exploring our experience, but exploring this dimensionless realm of experiencing. Was that Sandra? Hi.
Hi. So you're saying that you can't get a hold of this experiencing, which to me says it's outside of the conceptual mind. So then you're saying, let's not experience, what did you just say? Let's not experience our experiences?
No, just let's not explore, or let's not, I mean, it's okay to, right?
Right.
I mean,
But
there's lots of Buddhist teachings about exploring experience, but yeah, you're bringing up a great point.
My question was going to be, how does one, since it's outside of the conceptual mind, how does one actually explore how experiencing is different from experiences? If you could share part of your personal process of doing that. I mean, it's really hard, you know, these things that are outside of the conceptual mind, you know, I'm not really good at getting outside of my conceptual mind. I mean, now I have moments.
Here we're actually using our conceptual mind. At least, you know, this kind of discussion is definitely, we're using conceptual mind, right? So that's in these three types of wisdom I mentioned. The first two are conceptual, really. And that's really important, I think, to use conceptual mind here. But yeah, I like to first ask myself a conceptual question, because any question is conceptual, actually. But this conceptual question of, am I aware, or is there experiencing? Am I experiencing? So it's a conceptual question, but it's an interesting one. There's some conceptual questions that point, I would say, like more directly to the non-conceptual. So that's been one of my favorite questions for like many years now. Is there experiencing? Am I experiencing? That question, if I ask it sincerely and like in a fresh kind of way, almost like a child would ask, actually, am I experiencing? Like very curious and open, even though I know the answer already. Ask it in a conceptual way, but that conceptual question, kind of like, if the mind follows, kind of the mind responds to this question, the mind starts opening to this a kind of a non-conceptual dimension called experiencing, but it's not non-conceptual in the sense of some mystical experience, because that would be an experience. Right? It's so ordinary. It's like, yes, there's experiencing. Now, like, I'm kind of like in a new situation now. I'm like, before I asked the question, I was just paying attention to experiences. And now that I'm asking the question, it's not that experiences disappear, but now I'm like attending, I'm exploring, yeah, there's experience in here. Of course there is, and I totally forgot about it until I asked the question. And another little parenthetical point here is maybe even the next question, all these questions are conceptual, right? But they're conceptual questions about this ungraspable, non-conceptual reality. The next question might be like, did this experiencing just begin when I asked the question? Like I didn't notice it before, but now something shifted. When I asked that question, something shifted. My focus shifted from the experience of whatever, of the sights and sounds, to now, okay, now there's this ungraspable dimensionless space. But it's a little different now. Did that ungraspable dimensionless space just suddenly arise when I asked the question? And we might say, well, I'm not quite sure because it's happening, right? And I wasn't really aware. But my strong intuition is that actually it didn't just arise when I asked the question. I think it was already here, but I just wasn't paying attention to it because I was so into experiences. So that's and so we've just done a little conceptual exploration. Another question here: did it just arise when I looked for it? And we kind of feel we kind of sense like, no, it didn't. So we're getting information here about a non-conceptual realm by asking conceptual questions. And then there's other ones that we already went through today, like can I find any distinction or difference between my experiencing and your experiencing? That's another conceptual question. And so we explored in a kind of conceptual way, very carefully, trying to stay with our direct experience, not getting theoretical. And then we can kind of, again, have this sort of intuitive sense, actually, I can't find a difference between mine and yours. And I might even feel a little like shiver run up the spine when I kind of like, when that conclusion arises. Whoa, that's actually like a very strange conclusion. Because I usually think you are you and I'm me, and you have your mind and I have my mind, and I suddenly feel like, wait a second. So there's, again, it's not, and then if we grasp that, it's like, well, then this is the one mind we all share, the one reality of experiencing. Yes, and we're kind of conceptualizing it. And we're grasping it. So that's, of course, we're so wired for grasping that we do tend to do that. But can we just appreciate the ungraspability as we explore it conceptually? Can we explore this non-conceptual dimension while we conceptually explore it? It's very strange, and I think my talking about it right now is probably not doing it justice because it's so conceptual. But I think that's a great question and a great exploration. Is what is the relationship between conceptual understanding and, let's say, direct non-conceptual understanding? It's not like sometimes in Zen, I think we tend to separate them so much. Like traditional Zen might be like, it's the transmission outside the scriptures. Don't just drop all conceptuality. Don't even like talk about anything. Just sit and drop off body and mind. And then we tend to then this deep sort of habitual perspective of duality, of like, I'm here sitting in a body and I'm in a zendo, and like that never gets challenged. So I think the conceptual discussions and the Zen stories and all are the helping to unify the conceptual understanding and the non-conceptual understanding.
Kokyo, you used the word intuition as a part of your personal process. And this is something that I'm very interested in, and I've actually wondered about the relationship between intuition and our Buddha nature. Is intuition closer to our Buddha nature than our intellectual reasoning mind, do you think? When you get an intuitive, you know, something that you feel really strongly is intuitively true, even though you can't rationalize it, do you think that intuition is close to direct Buddha nature, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it's a tricky word, intuition, because it can have multiple meanings. And because sometimes I might have an intuitive sense of like, that's not a good thing, or that is a good thing, or something, and it's wrong, right? So I think there can be this kind of intuition that's like just a sense of things, but it's not accurate. It's just it's almost like a part of that unconscious mind, but still diluted unconscious mind. But then we might use intuition in this almost like other kind of way that's like a maybe I shouldn't have used the word intuition because it could be vague, but there is a kind of like non-conceptual knowing. I mean, Dogen Zenji uses the phrase like talking about realization. He's like, it's like drinking water and knowing for yourself whether it's hot or cold. So that's not exactly an intuition, but it's also not conceptual. And if somebody who didn't know what hot and cold meant, if you tried to say it's hot, they would say, well, what does that mean? Say, well, it's hard to describe, but I definitely know it is so. Or another example, we're kind of shifting into this, you know, what would be some examples for like a non-conceptual realization. Another one I think is kind of interesting is like, say this was the 3 types of wisdom again. You learn in elementary school that 2 + 2 is 4. You're learning these math problems, and they have you write it down. 2 + 2 = 4, and you're like, okay, I can memorize that. In other words, I have the wisdom from hearing that 2 + 2 is 4, and then you start reflecting on it, and well, what does that mean actually? 2 + 2 is 4, and you kind of you start to open to it as a little kid, even, right? Oh, actually, it's not just like random words on a page. It's actually, it means something, and it's very clear what it means once you understand. It's not just words. It actually is a kind of a truth that 2 + 2 is 4, and then you can even go beyond the words, and the teacher can put 2 apples on the side of the table and 2 apples on that side of the table and say, there's 2 apples here and 2 apples here. How many are there total? And without even like thinking about the formula anymore, you just know there's 4 apples. And so it's kind of non-conceptual, you know it so directly. And if somebody were to argue, actually 2 apples + 2 apples is 5 apples. And like, here, I can prove it with this. And you'd say, I don't care what you say about it. It's totally clear to me that there's 4 apples. So that's kind of like a non-conceptual understanding that they came from conceptual working with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's nearly 11. Maybe just a couple more questions.
Sure, if anyone, yes, Tracy.
You made a very clear distinction there that was confusing to me some time ago, not today, with Sandra's now about knowing, the word knowing, non-conceptual knowing, and the knowing, conceptual knowing, which when you began the talk with the question, am I experiencing? And then you introduced the idea of this, let's call them the 6 dimensions of experiencing. we covered the 5 conventional senses.
Oh yes, right. We didn't talk about the 6. Yeah.
This we didn't, but you did just kind of make clear what that is, that distinction of that knowing, which you mentioned at the beginning, was or is the knowing of things conceptually. Is if that's correct.
Yes, if there can be like a thought, could be an experience that arises within the space called the 6th dimension of experiencing, called knowing or cognizing. A thought or an emotion could arise within that space. Yeah.
Yeah. So those two are same word, but we could call it conceptual knowing and non-conceptual.
And this is a nice point to bring up here. Maybe this can be the closing point too. Is that yeah, we could say with usual conceptual knowing, you could even say a concept or a thought arises in the space of just dimensionless knowing, and so that's a little what we might call like dualistic consciousness, or if it seems like the thing that's arising, the experience that's arising within this space is something other than the space. It usually does feel that way. Like the sound seems like something other than the hearing. But actually, we didn't really talk about today, but you can see that really it's more like an appearance. The sound arising within the hearing is more like not something other than the hearing. That's another thing we can explore. It's just, it's a kind of congealing of hearing in the form of what we call a sound. Or a color is like almost like seeing expressing itself as a particular color. So that would be the non-dual version. But yeah, with this non-conceptual understanding, we could say it starts as, like we've been talking, it starts as 2 + 2 is 4, is arising in the space of dimensionless space of knowing as an idea, as a concept. 2 + 2 is 4. And then we keep looking at that 2 + 2 is 4, and we start to see how it's like a cloud arising in the sky of knowing. But the cloud is just like water vapor condensing into a cloud. So like that 2 + 2 is 4 is nothing other than the sky itself, expressing itself as a mathematical formula. But the meaning of the mathematical formula is the reality of 2 + 2 is 4. And that's like, as we see that more and more, it's almost like the numbers 2 + 2 is 4 start to dissolve into the sky, leaving no trace behind. But if we didn't start with 2 + 2, if we didn't start with the conceptual formula, we might not then appreciate how all thoughts are made of sky. So we can do zazen without kind of appreciating that non-duality. Ironically, because we're talking today, I'm kind of celebrating conceptual questioning, vipassana, as a kind of entrance to true non-duality, rather than kind of like sitting very calmly in the midst of a very subtle habit of duality. Maybe that's a good place to stop today. Thank you all for sharing this one screen today. And, may we fully enjoy this dimensionless space of ever-present experiencing, and any open-heartedness or positive experiences that might have arisen during this discussion. We call merit positive experiences. We dedicate those positive experiences to all beings who share this one experiencing. May all beings open to the dimensionless dimension